My true story, from Arizona. She's not his grandma, she's just a dead maid who doesn't know it yet. My Dale whispered that while I was folding my grandson's pajamas. I didn't react, but the next day I handed her something that made her knees buckle. I folded the tiny pajama top with trembling hands, careful not to drop it onto the floor as I stood near the kitchen doorway. I felt the sting of their voices slicing through the quiet morning like knives. She is not his grandma. She is just a corpse who knows how to fold clothes. Chelsea hissed, her tone low but blistering. If she had died a little sooner, I would not have to do any extra laundry, she added with a sneer. Then came the real blow. I swear, her smell is worse than expired canned fish. Every word struck me like ice against my ribs. I kept folding. I did not answer. I did not flinch. But my fingers trembled, and I felt my heart contract beneath my ribcage as though it were being crushed in a vise. My other hand found the edge of a drawer and gripped it for support. My knuckles turned white, but I stood still, the silence in my veins colder than the dawn light streaming in through the window. The voices trailed off as they carried on toward the pantry. I heard Michael's widow, my daughter-in-law Chelsea, telling our 5-year-old grandson something about the morning routine. I remembered when that little boy used to call me Grandma Eleanor, with a grin so bright it could chase away an eclipse. Now I was just the woman folding his clothes, an extra set of hands nobody had asked for. Nobody saw me, nobody recognized me. My name is Eleanor Johnson. I am 80 years old. I once held dozens of newborns in my arms as a midwife in Tucson, guiding mothers through the first breath of their babies with compassion, warmth, and expertise. I delivered Michael in 1970, the son I raised with pride and care. I have held hundreds of children at the start of their lives. I never expected I would one day be treated like a stranger in the house of my own grandson. Yet here I stand, silent, as they erode everything I built over decades, my dignity, my place in the family, even the name Grandma. I tucked the pajama top into the drawer a little too gently, as if I might break a fragile memory. I swallow the ache in my throat and turn to slip away, but I pause. I breathe in, I breathe out. 1, 2, 3. I remind myself of why I stay. For him. That boy deserves more than a grandmother without a voice, folding clothes like a hired help. It was less than a year ago when Michael fell ill. I still remember the day. He came home from the hospital, his face pale but eyes bright as he greeted me. I slept beside him, spooned broth into his lips at midnight, and listened to his raspy cough when he thought I was asleep. I used to read to him from his favorite books, urging him to hold on just a little longer. We both knew the race was against time. Before he closed his eyes for the last time, he told me he trusted me to love his son as he would have. He handed me a legal document granting me guardianship of his child and whispered, "If anything happens, don't let Chelsea take him." He had the foresight to include a clause in his will: if I, his mother, were ever mistreated or forcibly removed, then Chelsea would forfeit all inheritance. I listened, tears streaming down my cheeks. I promised him I would protect that boy with every breath I have left. Michael passed away quietly in my arms 3 months later. The funeral chapel was full of loving memories. But when we arrived home, Chelsea had already begun to act. She rearranged the furniture, canceled my phone line, and packed my belongings down into the basement. She told the neighbors I was aging out of my role, a danger to the child, and confused by simple tasks. She branded me a burden. Suddenly I was not Eleanor. I was Maid. I heard her introduce me that way at a neighborhood barbecue. I cleaned her spills, washed her dishes, folded my own grandson's clothes and hers, as though I were paid to serve a household I once led with joy and confidence. I pull my shawl tighter around my shoulders and let out a soft breath. I smooth my skirt and cross the hallway carpet, trying to tread lightly, so that they do not hear me approaching. I left the drawer half open so that if they noticed, they would know they forgot to shut it themselves. An old bag room is not supposed to be tidy, I suppose. I say a quiet prayer, not for pity, not for attention, but for courage. I have come this far. I will not step back now. They think because my hair is silver and my hands are wrinkled that I have nothing left inside. They are wrong. I may walk slower, I may speak gentler, but my mind remains as sharp as the day I studied every stage of childbirth, every sign of distress, every whispered plea for help. I have cared for life. I have trained new nurses. I taught responsibility, empathy, resilience. Now I will use what I learned to fight back, not with noise or anger, but with the quiet, unshakable strength of truth. The voices shift again from the kitchen. Chelsea is telling my grandson to get dressed. The boy's footsteps come toward the drawer. I step back and let him open it, reaching for his pajama top. He doesn't look at me. He is only 5 after all, and tonight will be his bedtime. All I want is to fold his clothes, tuck him in, and say I love you once more before he drifts off. But tonight, and all nights after, that will be my mission. Not just the folding, but the proof that I belong here, that I am more than a ghost in the hallway. I close the drawer gently, hear the soft click of latch meeting frame, and step away. My spine is straighter, my heart steadier. A single thought in the glow of early morning. Wars are not always fought with swords. Sometimes they begin with a whisper, a promise kept quietly, and a folding motion that holds more meaning than any shout. I walk down the hallway, leaving the drawer slightly ajar, like a promise that I will return, not just to fold, but to stand my ground. Today is only the beginning. I remember the days when our kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and morning pancakes. Michael, my dear son, would sit at the table with his toddler son in his lap, reconstructing plastic dinosaurs for hours while I brewed decaf and smiled at my 2 favorite boys. When Michael was well, he teased me gently, "Mom, careful. You're going to start spoiling him rotten." And I would laugh and remind him, "That's your job when he's older." We were 3 generations of love, lined up around that old oak table, chatting over breakfast, Sunday news, plans for birthdays. Then illness crept in, an insidious whisper that grew louder until it consumed my son. It began with fatigue, faint excuses, and then the diagnosis: terminal cancer. I refused to leave his side. I washed his hair when he could no longer hold a comb. I fed him broths because he had lost his appetite. I slept on a makeshift cot in his room, holding his hand through tremors, whispering old lullabies we both knew from his childhood. His toddler, my grandson, slept in the next room, unaware but close enough to hear the sobs in the night, though I tried hard to mask them with comforting hums. Meanwhile, Chelsea was distant. She claimed she needed pampering to stay balanced. She spent evenings at luxury spas and cocktail parties late into the night. I found expensive gown tags in her purse when I reorganized a drawer. I wondered then what she was celebrating or hiding while her husband was fading. One evening, Michael looked up at me with sunken blue eyes, but that familiar spark of intelligence. "Mom," he said, weak but determined, "take good care of him. Promise me?" He gestured toward his son's room. I nodded, tears trailing down my cheeks as I squeezed his hand. "Always, sweetheart." The next morning, we signed papers we both knew were crucial. Guardianship of my grandson passed to me in the event I remained alive, ensuring his well-being regardless of what came next. Michael had written a clause in his will, a legal guarantee: if my mother is ever abused, mistreated, or forced out of our home, then Chelsea shall forfeit all rights to my estate. He spoke those words slowly, as though engraving them into my mind. I promised him again that night. We both knew he would not wake from the next night. When he passed, the house wept with me. I wept for the loss of the son I raised, the man I adored, the friend I confided in. But I also wept for my grandson, my hard-won mission. Chelsea reacted immediately after the funeral. Instead of grief, I found her energetic steps and clipped instructions. Within a week, I was packed and moved into the basement. The furnace was broken, the single bulb flickered. A handwritten note bearing her script said, "It is more suitable for you, Mom." She told our neighbors, with a practiced smile, that I was confused by loss, too disoriented to care for a young child, and safe in the house. I watched her pucker her nose as my grandson helped me arrange his toy trucks into a line. Later, she called adults in the neighborhood to complain about the old lady making strange noises in the attic. I tried to remain composed. I switched the bulb to a new compact fluorescent. Sorted my few possessions. We all knew what awaited me. The nursing home she secretly researched. I thought of Michael's claws and clenched my fist. For him, for the boy I carry my heart for, I would stand firm. She made appointments with placement agencies, scheduled visitation to nursing facilities, and tried to sway the lawyers overseeing guardianship paperwork. She looked at me in the hallway with pity. Her expression said clearly, "You are in the way." But I stood tall and quiet, focused on the distant promise I made. To protect my grandson. I refused to show fear, but my mind sharpened. I retraced Michael's handwriting line by line. I memorized every clause. I reviewed the paperwork and tucked them into my sweater every morning. They believed that because my hair was white and my skin brittle, I was powerless. They believed a broken woman would not fight. But a promise given at my son's deathbed is not something that fades. It burns. It sustains me. That basement may be cold, but it is not prison. It is a station in a silent war I am determined to win. And when I step out again, I will be carrying his legacy with each breath I take. I wake each morning to the dull hum of the basement furnace, if I'm lucky. Below the thin mattress lies the echo of my son's last night of life. Above, in the kitchen and living room, the voices of strangers echo freely. They are my family now, but I am a ghost among them. They removed my phone shortly after I moved down here. "Too complicated for you, Mom," Chelsea said, patting me on the shoulder before tucking it into her purse. "I used to call Michael twice a day. Now, I don't call at all. My grandson knows I am his grandmother, but they taught him to call me the Maid. They've dressed him in clean clothes each morning, brushed his hair, but not with his grandmother's hands, just Chelsea's curt swipe of a brush, her soft reprimands. Now be nice to Grandma the Maid." I learned their routine by watching the sliver of daylight from the cracked basement window. Between the curtains, through the door's narrow gap, I glimpsed the morning coffee ritual. Chelsea in her tailored blouse, my grandson in pajamas, chattering about preschool. His little voice waves through the crack. "Grandma folded my pajamas this morning." Her eyes flick to the basement door, a simmer of disdain, and she snaps, "Yes, he said that. Thank you, Maid." My heart twists when I hear that word, but I force my face into its habitual mask. Calm, dutiful, quiet. After the funeral, she began leaving the house at night, sometimes late, sometimes early, returning with the smell of new leather or waxed floors. She came back with checking account receipts, supposedly from car repairs. But the envelopes thickened and the rubber stamp ratified. I watched those envelopes multiply. One evening I counted them, hiding behind the tissue box. There were 3 this week, all for odd amounts, 500 here, 850 there. My mind raced. Are they spousal survivor benefits she's redirecting? Is she tapping the estate? And this morning I discovered the safe, the one with my past, Michael's guardianship papers, his will, undisturbed but uncovered. The safe was open, the papers spilled. My breath locked up. I blinked, told myself, observe. I slipped under the basement door after dinner with my grandson. He clutched a dinosaur plush under one arm. I tilted my head in the gap and pretended to falter with the door. He hurried forward, concerned. "Grandma?" I held my breath. He spoke in that small tone. "Do you want help?" I forced a reassuring smile and patted him. I closed the door and heard Chelsea's footstep approaching. I froze, listening to her footsteps swirl as she climbed the stairs. My tears nearly fell, but I blinked them back. Soon afterward, I realized what I needed to protect. That night, I retrieved my old tote from beneath the cot, a faded bag filled with important documents. I dusted them off. The original birth certificate of my grandson with my name stamped as temporary guardian. Michael's notarized will with the no abuse clause. Letters of his devotion to me. I clutched them to my chest and said out loud, "They will not take you from me." Success would rely not on confrontation, but on preparation. I needed counsel. My phone was gone, but mine wasn't the only number in my memory. Together with Monica, a girl I had tutored in high school who is now a legal aid assistant, they arranged clandestine visits under the guise of checking on my handwriting. She delivered transcripts of what I believed she would read, comforting poems, and perhaps grocery lists. Instead, she scrutinized my documents through her glasses with steady assurance. During one visit, she opened her folder and looked up at me. "All the papers are in order. You have guardianship. And this clause," she pointed at Michael's will, "it is ironclad." I nodded, voice quiet but firm. "If I lose custody, he loses everything." She paused, taking her glasses off. They know. She knows. That night I lay awake, startled by the possibilities. If they file a motion to revoke guardianship, is it gone? What if they claim I'm unfit or incompetent? Chelsea's ambitions were more than financial, they were dominion. She wanted the house and the control over a 6-year-old boy who could grow into her puppet. I watched their shadows through that basement crack. I counted the light under the door. She leaves at 6 a.m. most days, returning at 8. The safe is open around her arrival. The receipts are mailed between noon and 2. I confined my outings to grocery runs at off hours, using a neighbor's landline for Monica's number. The conflict simmers. Chelsea at breakfast, calm and disarming, handing me a damp rag. The living room window is dusty. I dust it, shaking inside. During weekend chore rotation, she tells my grandson, "Grandma helps, don't you see? She is our maid." He looks at me, puzzled, and I smile from behind the vacuum cleaner. In the quiet dark of the basement, I spread my documents and whispered my son's name. I thought of his smile, the day he was born, that last conversation where he wept and blessed me. I thought of the pillow he pressed my cheek into as he slept beside me in that hospital fright and pain. Someone once asked what legacy I wanted to leave. I held her hand and said, "Honor and truth." I choose to remember that moment. And so, I remain silent, but watchful. I check the cracks at 3 a.m., my heart still strong. I rehearse my words to the judge. I know she believes she can erase me, but she cannot erase him, and she cannot erase what is proven by paper and love. The day may come when she files a motion, when she claims incompetence or abuse. But I have the proof ready. I hold the original paperwork in my tote whenever I go upstairs. I hold fresh breath and calm resolve, and at night, the voice of my grandson asks if I miss him, and I say softly, "Always, but I am here, and I will protect you." They call me a maid, they call me a ghost, but I am Eleanor, guardian, grandmother, widow, and witness, and I am only beginning. I received the letter on a white envelope stamped with the seal of New Mexico. My hands tightened around it as I carried it down the hallway toward the basement. Under my lamp, I pried it open. Inside lay the death certificate, my death certificate. Eleanor Margaret Johnson, it read, date of death, April 5th, 2025, issued by the state of New Mexico. My bones rattled. Official, legal, erased. I was still alive, feeding my grandson breakfast every morning, folding his pajamas, reading him stories at night. But in the eyes of the law, I was dead. I sank into the rickety chair beside my cot, the certificate landing on my lap like a coffin lid. My fury flared. My confusion surged. My grief for my son flashed once more. It could not die. Cannot ever die. I smoothed the paper with trembling fingers. In the basement gloom, I took a steadying breath. I refused to dissolve in despair. This was a battle for my existence, for my grandson, for the vow my son entrusted to me. I did not get to vanish. I moved quickly. One by one, I assembled my evidence. I retrieved the original birth certificate. My grandson's name, Guardian Eleanor M. Johnson, notarized March 3, 2025. That faded seal indicated a tangible responsibility my son granted me in his final days. Next, I reached his will, the staple still crisp on the first page. I opened to the clause he insisted on so strongly. If my mother is removed or abused in any way, Chelsea Johnson forfeits all inheritance and custody, without exception. It was embossed with Michael's signature. He fought his last breath for that assurance. Then I held the letters I'd discovered in my tote, monthly pension payments, Social Security disbursements, all rerouted to Chelsea's account, under my name. Figures lined up, exact to the cent. I added bank statements, utility bills in her possession, receipts from stores. I stacked them like a fortress. At my side fluttered my tutor-turned-lawyer, Monica Reyes. She had knocked on the basement door at dusk under the pretense of checking my blood pressure. Instead, she carried empathy and urgency. As she watched me iron the papers, she murmured, "They can be arrested for fraud and forgery. You have everything." A knot tightened in my throat. I lifted my gaze. "Then we do this now." We planned swiftly. Monica called her office, arranged for certified copies, notarized affidavits, and a hearing date in Maricopa County Court. Each document became a nail in the coffin of Chelsea's deceit. The next morning I rose early. I wore my navy mule cardigan, the one Michael used to squeeze when he was sick. I tucked the stack into a red folder stamped certified copy. I carried it up the stairs like a champion carrying a torch. In the kitchen, Chelsea sat at the table, her eyes fixed on her laptop where she was drafting an email. A half-finished matcha latte steamed beside her. She looked up at my entrance and frowned. I moved deliberately. Without a word, I set the folder in front of her. The seal glinted under the soft morning sun filtering through the blinds. She hesitated, then reached for the matcha. Her fingers brushed the folder. She frowned deeper. "My death certificate," I said softly. "Issued by New Mexico. You filed it last week." She stared. The matcha shook and tipped. It fell, shattering against the tile. Liquid pooled as her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. I did not die. My tone was calm, but the basement furnace beat in my skull like a war drum. I was erased for your convenience. You tried to kill my name, to kill my rights. I paused. Do you think I will disappear? Do you think my grandson does not see who his grandmother is? A single tear slid down her cheek. Whether from guilt, shock, or fear, I could not tell. Her shoulders drooped. I leaned closer. The silence was a drumbeat. "I have the birth certificate, the will, the bank statements. They prove every payment you rerouted, every deed you forged, every lie you told." Tremor flickered in her eyes. My heart clenched. I had not wanted this to hurt her, but my voice remained grave. "I presented everything to Monica last night. We filed charges." My voice lowered. "Catfishing the government, forging documents, abusing guardianship, felonies." Silence thickened. She looked at the floor. The morning sun no longer felt warm. It felt accusing. I straightened and touched the folder lid. "This is your invitation to fix it. Give back custody, transfer all incorrect payments, cooperate with authorities, and apologize." She swallowed. I recognized the moment. The moment she realized she had been beaten not by anger, but by structure. I had built the facts into steel walls she could not tear down. She managed a whisper. "Eleanor, you don't get to speak yet." My voice was gentle but steady. "Apologize to my grandson, to his mother who died, to the man who trusted me with his son, and hand over every document I took." Her lips trembled, and she nodded. I straightened. "Good. Then we begin cleaning this up." I turned and left the room. The click of the folder closing was louder than any victory shout. It was the slam of finality. For a moment I paused on the stairs, looked down at the scattered matcha tea, the shattered glass. Her world was fracturing. My world began to realign. In that quiet, I understood something about gravity. If you force the earth around you to shift even by a whisper, the whole world tilts. On my walker, I descended back to the basement. The papers lay ready on the cot. I touched them. I touched his name. I touched the cause he died for. Custody remained mine, legacy unbroken. I drew a breath deep enough to anchor me. The echo from above was the distant crack of something breaking. In a few days, it would be final. In a few weeks, my grandson would be safe. And in this moment, I stood, alive, vindicated, unwavering. The false certificate lay in my basement like a tombstone that said, "Resurrection possible." I smiled once, tiny, triumphant. I was still here. I would stay. I would finish this. I arrived at the courthouse early, clutching the thick folder in my hands. Monica and I walked through the grand doors into the marble foyer, and I tried not to let my heart race. Though I was 80, I felt more alive than ever, fueled by purpose and by the idea that justice could still be served. Monica had been meticulous. She filed complaints for forgery, identity theft, fraudulently obtained social assistance, and, most damningly, attempted manipulation of guardianship. The papers were airtight, twisted family records, duplicated signatures, unusual bank transfers, a fabricated death certificate. Each one bore the unmistakable fingerprints of Chelsea's desperation. We also brought accomplice testimonies. Harper, next door, saw me sleeping in that drafty basement. She heard Chelsea cursing and yelling at me for messing up the laundry. She once found me sitting on the front porch in tears because my pills went missing, and Chelsea had replied, "You don't need them if you can't handle your life." Then there was Lane, the evening babysitter, who shared how Chelsea had once shoved me aside to grab my grandson, telling him, "Come on, honey, Grandma's not feeling well again. Let's get away from her." These statements would show a consistent pattern of verbal and emotional abuse, evidence that I was being driven out deliberately. In the courtroom, the judge, an older man with kind eyes, looked at me carefully as Monica presented the case. I sat in the gallery, posture straight, eyes forward. When Monica began reading Chelsea's forged documents, I felt vindicated. I allowed the words to wash over me without flinching. Around midday, Monica stated the motions. "Your Honor, we ask the court to suspend all guardianship changes and revoke any financial benefits improperly obtained by the defendant, Mrs. Johnson. We ask for custody protection to remain with Mrs. Eleanor Johnson pending full investigation." My breath caught. This was the moment. The judge paused. He adjusted his glasses and reviewed the will clause. "If my mother is abused or removed from home, my wife, Chelsea, forfeits inheritance and guardianship." He glanced at me, then back at the bench. The courtroom was silent. When he spoke, his voice carried authority. "Having reviewed the evidence, the notarized will, the death certificate from New Mexico, the financial records, and the sworn testimony, it is clear that Mrs. Johnson's rights have been illegally undermined. This court hereby suspends any proceeding to transfer guardianship. All social benefits obtained by Mrs. Johnson and rerouted to Mrs. Johnson under her name shall be subject to review and possible restitution. Guardianship remains with Ms. Eleanor Johnson. Defendant, Mrs. Johnson," he paused as Chelsea almost dropped her head, "is found to have misrepresented facts under oath. Further hearings will determine criminal culpability." I exhaled. The floodgates opened. Chelsea's shoulders slumped, her face drained of color. I remained calm, even compassionate. I did not gloat. I only knew that my grandson was safe. When we left the courtroom, Monica whispered, "We did it." Her voice shook with relief. I looked at her and nodded, feeling the weight shift from my shoulders. We headed down the corridor, passing family lawyers, law clerks, and reporters who had caught wind of the hearing. Outside, a small group of community members waited, neighbors, church ladies, friends. They offered smiles, hugs, tears. Mrs. Harper grabbed my hand and squeezed it so hard I almost winced. "You showed what grace looks like," she said. That evening, I returned home, changed into my worn slippers, and carried my grandson upstairs. He clung to me like the anchor of my heart. I tucked him into bed, kissed his forehead, and read him one of his favorite bedtime stories. His sleepy whisper caught me. "Grandma, it's okay now, right?" My eyes stung with tears as I replied, "Yes, darling. Grandma will always keep you safe." In the coming days, Monica filed criminal proceedings. The Social Services Department opened audits into the benefits transfer. A judge approved a temporary restraining order preventing Chelsea from contacting me or my grandson. I handed over the folder of evidence to investigators and trusted the system to carry the rest. By week's end, a press release confirmed what we already knew. Chelsea had been charged with forgery, identity theft, misappropriation of public benefits, and obstruction of grandparental guardianship. If convicted, she would face serious legal consequences. More importantly, the truth had prevailed. I returned to my basement suite, not as a prisoner, but as a guardian with rights intact. I started making jewelry again, the old hobby I'd put aside for years. I took that first bead, ran the wire through it, and felt something inside me thread back together. A month later, I filed an official petition for full guardianship of my grandson, effective immediately. The judge signed it. I hung the document by my bedside like a talisman, shining with promise. Late at night, I sometimes wander the hallway, pausing at the closed door of the basement, but I don't go inside, not anymore. The stairs no longer feel cold, the hallway no longer echoes threats. It hums with quiet triumph. The next morning I sat in the dining room beside a steaming cup of coffee, writing in my journal. I stood still, I spoke truth. I won a fight I did not start, but could not surrender. Across the table, in her own home now, Chelsea would prepare another matcha latte, but she'd do it knowing the fight isn't over, and she already knows who holds the power. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The sun was warm on my face. I had faced fear and emerged whole. I had fought deceit with documents, lies with testimony, and hatred with dignity. I had won for my grandson, for my son's memory, for every elderly woman who dared to stand instead of disappear. This battle was done. The war for our future had just begun, and I was ready. I arrived at the courthouse in the late morning, the sun casting long shadows across the stone steps. I felt neither fear nor doubt, but a resolute calm. My grandson clutched my hand as we walked into the courtroom. Monica, my former student and now formidable attorney, slipped me the final affidavit. The air inside was thick, with anticipation, with verdicts yet unspoken. Chelsea entered shortly afterward, shoulders held high, her designer tote slung over her arm. She smiled at the media in the back row, her lips tight. Her posture radiated confidence, a confidence I recognized. It was the same arrogance she had wielded when she called me a dead maid. But now she stepped into a courtroom where evidence and truth held the upper hand. The session opened with Monica stating the purpose. Your Honor, we come before the court today to address the serious misconduct of Mrs. Chelsea Johnson. She laid out the complaints plainly: forgery of a death certificate in New Mexico, illicit transfer of Social Security and pension payments, orchestrating a guardianship coup while unlawfully evicting her grandmother from cohabitation. She presented a stack of documents: photocopies of the falsified certificate, bank statements tracing benefits funneling into Chelsea's account, and sworn statements from neighbors and caregivers. The judge, a stern woman with seasoned eyes, took it all in. Her presence demanded respect. She set her glasses on the bench and called Chelsea's name. Mrs. Johnson, the court has reviewed these documents, she said, voice even. Is there any explanation for why a death certificate listing your grandmother as deceased, filed in New Mexico, exists? Chelsea's confident facade flickered. She cleared her throat. I don't know how that happened, Your Honor. It must be a clerical error. She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. I submitted paperwork to have her declared incapacitated, but not dead. Monica immediately responded. Clerical errors do not explain the use of my client's identity to collect federal benefits. These documents bear her signature and were notarized. The death certificate is on file, used to cancel her benefits and facilitate your application for guardianship. Chelsea's face paled. She shifted in her seat as murmurs filled the room. Monica continued, calmly yet firmly. Furthermore, bank records show monthly transfers totaling $6,000 from Social Security and her retirement benefits deposited under your control. The court reporter typed briskly. Chelsea opened her mouth. The judge raised a hand. You will answer questions directly, she ordered. The questioning continued. Monica grilled Chelsea with precision. Did you file a fatal form with the National Social Security Administration indicating your grandmother is deceased? Chelsea stuttered. I did, but because she was incapacitated and bedridden. That statement is false, Monica replied. She lives, she is present. A health assessment dated 3 weeks ago confirms full lucidity. Flashbacks of basement nights came unbidden, but I sat upright. I had prepared for this moment. The judge nodded and turned toward me. Ms. Eleanor Johnson, would you please stand and say your name and relation to the child? I rose and faced the bench, my heart steady. I am Eleanor Johnson, grandmother and legal guardian of this child, I said. I have cared for him since birth. The judge then shifted her gaze to Chelsea. In light of the seriousness of these allegations, identity fraud, misappropriation of public benefits, false statements to government agencies, and interference with custodial guardianship, the court is compelled to intervene. Temporary guardianship will remain with Ms. Johnson. Mrs. Johnson is hereby restricted from any contact with the minor. All accounts under the grandmother's name, which were used to receive benefits, are to be frozen pending resolution. I felt a breath leave me, simultaneously relief and validation. The courtroom grew quiet. Only the judge's voice broke through. I am issuing a protective order under Family Code 2042. Mrs. Chelsea Johnson is ordered to vacate the residence by tomorrow morning. An audible gasp rose from Chelsea. She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. She rose to protest. Your Honor, this is unfair. The judge held up her hand. Court is adjourned. As the gavel slammed, I felt everything settle. Justice had spoken, loud and clear. No longer would I be hidden away. No longer would my name be erased. Outside the courtroom, members of the public approached, complimenting Monica. My old neighbor, Mrs. Harper, squeezed my hand and whispered, "You did it. You showed them all." I exhaled slowly, watching Chelsea drive away in her sedan, escorted by court security, the doors shut on a life built on pretense. That night, I didn't return to the basement. Instead, I cooked dinner in the kitchen for my grandson. He watched me measure ingredients, stir sauce, and tell him stories about his father. I was home again, fully present, fully seen. Tucking him into bed, I whispered, "We are safe now. Always." He closed his eyes. Later, I sat by the window with a cup of chamomile. My chambers were calm. Papers from today lay neatly stacked, certified orders, medical records, affidavits. A folder marked evidence waited for my review. I felt weary, but not defeated. The first courthouse victory was complete. The road ahead would require further hearings for restitution, possible criminal charges, formal guardianship. But I had taken the field and won the opening play. Tomorrow I would rest briefly and strategize with Monica. I would secure guardianship legally and file for damages. I would ensure Chelsea faced legal consequences, and I would work to restore the lost months, the stolen time, with my grandson. But tonight I allowed myself one small luxury, quiet satisfaction. I whispered into the darkness, "You wanted me silenced. I have spoken. You wanted me gone. I remain. This fight goes on, but I am not afraid." Outside, the Arizona night air was still. Inside, a grandmother and guardian dreamed of brighter days ahead. I arrived at the courthouse again before dawn, the Arizona desert sun months away from rising. The heavy wooden doors held an air of finality as I stepped inside with Monica at my side and my grandson's soft hand in mine. Today marked the last legal proceeding, what Monica called the finishing stroke. I breathed in the scent of polished wood and quiet determination. Monica began by stating the amended complaint: identity fraud, forgery of death certificate, financial exploitation via misuse of disability and pension benefits, misrepresentation in guardianship filings, and money laundering through Chelsea's personal accounts. The courtroom listened as she walked them through evidence: bank records showing systematic transfers of funds meant for me, bank statements revealing incoming benefits, and mismatched signatures on critical documents. It was a damning portrait of premeditated crime. The judge, a stern man with a gaze like steel, listened intently. Before the session began, he had asked Monica, "We will hear from the defendant today." She had nodded, and later arranged for Chelsea to have representation. Chelsea entered the courtroom looking worn, far less confident than at the last hearing. She clutched papers in her hand and avoided my gaze. Midway, the judge paused. He looked over the dossier. "Ms. Johnson, these documents are extensive. Do you have anything to say on your own behalf?" he asked. Chelsea took a hesitant breath. "Your Honor, I deeply regret what I did. I was overwhelmed, grieving, I lost control. I am so sorry to Eleanor and to my son. I only wanted to provide stability." Her voice cracked. Some sympathetic murmurs rippled through the courtroom. She blinked back tears and stared at me for the first time in these proceedings. I felt a pang, memories of Michael's kindness at her wedding, and yet I knew her apology was hollow, too late. I kept my eyes forward. My voice had no tremor when Monica whispered, "Let the court know you are ready." The judge spoke. "Grief does not justify crimes, particularly forgery of legal documents relating to death, false statements to government agencies, and financial deception. The court finds beyond a reasonable doubt a pattern of fraudulent conduct." He turned to the bailiff. "Issue the final orders." The verdict came swiftly. Chelsea was to pay restitution of all misappropriated funds, amounting to nearly $60,000. She was fined $5,000 for forgery and $1,000 for filing false documents. Guardianship was now permanently and irrevocably vested in me. A restraining order was issued. Chelsea is prohibited from contacting or visiting my grandson or me. Any attempt to approach our home would result in arrest. She was also required to complete 200 hours of community service under court monitoring and attend grief and elder support counseling. Silence fell. Then soft sobs emerged. Mrs. Harper in the audience, tears glistening on her cheeks. I exhaled a breath I did not realize I had been holding. Monica stepped forward. Your Honor, may I request that this order include full inclusion of the property settlement deferred under the original will and permission for Ms. Eleanor Johnson to commence guardianship workshops at her home using the funds. The judge nodded, signed a supplemental order. Monica filed the final documents. I signed them with a hand that shook, not from fear, but from relief. The signature carried weight. Eleanor M. Johnson, legal guardian for life, Arizona. As the gavel dropped again, I felt the magnitude of the moment. I turned toward my grandson. He was nestled into Mrs. Harper's arms, listening with wide, trusting eyes. I stood taller than I had in months. My heart, once crushed by cruelty, now glowed with protection and pride. Afterward, outside, reporters hustled, but Monica had prepared me. No comment. I simply patted my grandson's head and said softly, "We are safe. You are safe." I watched Chelsea walk past, head down, no more arrogance. She swerved toward the doors, and I thought I saw sadness, or maybe regret. But it didn't matter. My purpose had been to protect this child and restore honor to our name, and that I had done. That evening back home, I held my grandson close. The warmth of our home felt like redemption. Rubble of stolen months lay buried in these walls, but now every laughter, every bedtime story, every whispered prayer echoed across reclaimed ground. I realized now that what I had fought for was bigger than justice. It was a newly conquered peace, carved from cruelty and resilience. Later, I sat at my kitchen table, monitors and papers spread out, for the final step, organizing therapy and financial empowerment programs for other grandparents in legal battles. Monica would help register my foundation. The walls surrounding me were still stamped with signs of past pain, but in the lamplight, they shone with possibility. I thought of Michael. I thought of his love for justice, for truth. I had fulfilled his last wish, and I would spend the rest of my days honoring him and protecting this boy, for he was my legacy too. With pen in hand, I added the final names to the Foundation's charter and placed it into a binder next to my legal files. It felt right. It felt complete. At bedtime, I tucked my grandson in and kissed his forehead. "Sleep well," I whispered. "We have our future, sweetheart." And as the night settled, I allowed myself to feel proud. The world had tried to bury me, but I had risen, alive, vibrant, unbowed, and had taken back everything that mattered most. The morning Chelsea left, the house was still. Her shoulders hunched, her face pale, she moved like a shadow through the home she once tried to claim as hers. The court order was final, her accounts frozen, her access to my grandson revoked. Word had spread. The forged documents, the false death certificate, the stolen benefits. Her name became shorthand for betrayal in grocery lines and courtrooms alike. I stood by the window, watching as she climbed into a rental car. She gave the door one last glance, cold, defiant, then disappeared. The silence she left behind was peace. A few days later, I moved with Jacob to a sunlit bungalow 2 miles away. We filled the space with books, laughter, and soft blankets. At night, I told him stories about his father, about love and endurance, and the strength of a quiet woman who refused to vanish. In the mornings, we walked to the library, baked cookies, and breathed in the scent of Arizona sage. I started volunteering at the senior center, teaching women how to protect what's theirs, how to be heard even when dismissed. Their eyes lit up with hope. I had found something new to live for. 2 months later, the center held a ceremony. Jacob handed me a drawing, me holding his hand under a shining sun. At the bottom he wrote, "You are my mommy." My voice caught. The applause was thunderous. I stood tall. That night, I organized a candlelight vigil for Michael, my son. Friends and neighbors lit white candles. Jacob placed his in front of his father's photo. As the flames flickered, I held him close. "Your daddy's watching," I whispered. "He's proud of us." Later, tucking him into bed, he asked, "Are the bad people gone?" "Not always," I said, "but they're no longer in our story." He smiled sleepily. "I like our story." Letters soon arrived, women thanking me for speaking up. "Because of you, I wrote my will. Because of you, I stopped feeling crazy." I saved every one. As for Chelsea, she vanished into quiet disgrace. Her court appeal failed, her image erased, and our house? It was ours again. One morning I stood by the window, watching the Arizona sunrise. Jacob was at school. The air was crisp. Justice, I whispered, is not just the law. It's a heart that won't give up. That evening, I found Jacob's drawing on my nightstand. I ran my fingers over the crayon lines and smiled. The future? Still uncertain. But we endured. The truth didn't destroy us, it set us free. I blew out the candle on the sill and lay down, peaceful, because our story did not end in vengeance. It ended in light. ___. If this story stirred something inside you, if you've ever felt overlooked, unheard, or underestimated, remember, your silence is not your weakness. It's your preparation. And sometimes the softest voice is the one justice listens to most. This was my true story from Arizona. I didn't scream. I didn't fight dirty. I stood my ground with truth, memory, and love. And when the world tried to erase me, I handed it a pen and rewrote the ending myself. If you want more true stories of women who endured quietly but rose powerfully, subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Because revenge has no expiration date, and wisdom, it remembers everything.